I've worked through a lot of the Roland stock for this series already. And I need something to finish off the trains. So for the goods, we have the Ex-Corris brake van by Dundas Models. And for the passengers, it's Guard Van 5 by Westcliff Works. Hi guys. So, if you're a subscriber to the channel, you've already seen me build two of these kits, one for the Skarloey challenge and one for Corris. So I won't bore you with a third build, and we'll just cut straight to the painting stage. I've also added interior detail in the form of seating, as well as the grab handles. The second model in this video is the Westcliff Works Guards Van 5. This will complement the vintage train, and lives up to their typical high standard. The roof is pre-formed to the correct curve, and the surface detail is beautiful. It's available in a number of formats to suit various eras. As Nant will be present day, this is the modern one, with the connections for the alarm system and the like. It's also got separate doors, so you can model it with the doors open, or the doors closed, like a madman. The Corris van is all set for paint, so it's getting the cotton bud handle as a first port of call. Then it has an undercoat of grey car primer. Due to the brown top coat, I usually go for a red oxide primer, but I'll be starting with the interior here, so it's grey. The first colour is a sandy cream, and this will be kept for the interior walls, waist to roof. Being a light colour, it's much better to start with this now, as it's much harder to cover a dark colour with a light colour. The cream is then masked off. From pictures, the cut-off line for the cream is just below the bottoms of the windows. Rail match GWR brown is then used to cover the bottom half of the interior walls. This is tricky, and it's easy to overspray the door frame. And this shows the advantage to using acrylic, where you can dry the coats between the sprays to lower the risk. The exterior gets two coats of the same colour. This is apparently the correct colour for the van's recent rebuild. But it does look a little bit too brown on the model, if that makes sense. Taking Railmatch's word for it, the masking is removed from the interior, and it's done its job well. The floor is hand painted in slate grey, and this will also need a couple of coats. I decided to change the exterior brown and mix my own, which led to a much closer finish. You can see the difference between the two browns through the doorway. And with that looking about right, I'll start to paint in all the black. And due to the frames being all black, it's a much nicer finish to mask off the entire body and spray the black on as well. I tend to do a coat of black primer first, and then a top coat of black acrylic. It can be tricky to catch the small bits like the buffers from all angles, so I try to get a little bit of a system in place where I hit them from all sides. The black details can now be painted in as well. These were basically the wire grab handles I added and the ironwork on the rear and ends of the van. And this is done by hand with the same black as the frames. With the van being freshly refurbished on the railway, none of these parts will need any weathering done, which makes things easier. Finally, the whole model is sprayed with Humbrol satin varnish. This is the perfect balance, I think. Glossy enough to have a sheen in the light, but not too glossy to make it look, well, gross and unrealistic. The paint is all finished, so glazing can go on. It's only got 2 windows, and I used Deluxe Materials glue and glaze to attach it. The roof is made by cutting a thin piece of plasticard that comes with the kit to the correct shape. This is then rolled to a curve and the rain strips glued on. I use liquid poly as both parts are plastic. The excess material can then be trimmed off. The roof is sprayed with a grey car primer, but the colour will depend on the era that you model, as I believe it's been white. The roof is glued on with a few drops of superglue on the model. The roof is then held down onto the model to get a good bond as the glue dries. Then the wheel sets can be popped in. I had issues with mine this time, and added top hat bearings after filming this. The van is new out of the paint shop in real life, so it looks neat, but I still want to add a very light coat of weathering, so it blends in with the rest of the stock on the layout. This is the standard black acrylic wash that I do, but it has been super thinned down this time, so much that it's actually difficult to see any when it's dry at all. Right, moving on to the guards van, and the first thing to do is to remove any resin not needed. This includes the bars between the axle boxes which were left for support, which I just snap off, and then some other tiny little bits around the small details like the handbrake. This didn't actually need to be done, but just for a thorough job, I filed back the window frames, just to make sure that the corners are smooth and clean. The doors are treated to a nice filing on their backs, which just makes for a close fit for when they're added to the model. As these parts are really lightweight, I glued them onto a cocktail stick to hold them in place for painting, so they don't fly off. And of course, the main body has a cotton bod attached. This model is coated with red oxide primer, which is a really good base for both the TR red and the brown that this model uses. And again, the door gets the same undercoat. I decided that the system worked for the Corris van, so I'll do it again here. And I started with the van's interior. And this is the cream and brown, so cream first as it's the lighter colour. When the cream has dried off, it's all masked off and the brown is added. The masking tape is removed and it's all looking really nice. So I'll block off the interior so it doesn't get overspray from the outside. The top coat is the same as the coaches in the recent videos, which is Humbrol Gloss 220. I did 2 coats of this, but you can see how much of a difference it makes having just the red undercoat here. I always move the model around as much as I can when I'm spraying it, so I hit all parts of the panels. Before I start working on the brown, I thought it would be a good idea to paint the louvers on the doors. This was done with TR green, the one that I mixed up. And then a black wash was applied to give shade in between them. At this point, I'd given the red 3 days to dry and it was still slightly sticky to the touch, so I sprayed it with a thin coat of varnish to seal it in so I could proceed. The varnish was dry within a few hours, so I could then apply the masking tape over it. My usual technique is to paint all the vertical beams and then all the horizontal beams separately. So, starting with the vertical here, I'm using my pointy tool thing to push the tape into the corners to reduce the risk of the blurred edges from sprayed paint. It also helps to run the pointy tool thing along the edges for the same purpose. The doors are going to be done using the same method. The brown, Humbrol number 62, can now be sprayed on. I'm painting the ends of the van at the same time as the vertical beams, as all the masking tape is clear of the edges of the ends. This is a paint with a matte finish, and it seems to be a bit more forgiving with thicker coats, and it takes more to get runs in the paint. Removing the masking, and the method has proven successful, with nice crisp joins in the paint. The horizontal strips are done in the same way, with the pointy tool thing being used to push the tape into the corners around the vertical beams. I'm also masking off the guard's ducket here. The sides were sprayed brown in the previous step, so it can be masked off so it doesn't receive too many coats. The smaller pieces of tape are used to fine-tune the edges of the masking, as due to the doors framing along the top, it's not actually a level line all the way along. The other part to make sure you hit with the brown here is the footplate along the platform side of the van. It doesn't take much to cover the red nicely with the brown, only 2 thin layers will do it. The final colour to apply with the gun is the black on the frames. And like the Corris van, I found it beneficial to apply the black primer first, as it gets a good dark coverage, whereas the black acrylic on top is more of a dull finish. Onto the hand painted details, and it looks like the detail around the ticket booth opening is TR green. And this detail has been printed raised, so it's easy to get a tidy finish. The masking off the roof has been removed, so I can paint the black detail along the door frame. This, like the other black detail, is the black acrylic. The handbrake is the same. And with the handbrake moulded onto the van end, you'll need to be careful you don't swipe the van with black paint as you work around it. The doors can finally go on. I glued them on for peace of mind, but they are technically a push fit within the frame. The glazing is applied in the same way as the Corris van and utilises the glue-in glaze. The roof has been sanded smooth as it can have very subtle ridges from the printing. This can then be sprayed with grey primer. The little roof on top of the ducket is also painted, however for ease this was just hand painted. I did a first coat of Humbrol grey primer, but then I sprayed the grey car primer into the lid and hand painted that on top, so that it matched the main roof. Like I said before, the roof was printed at the same radius as the van ends, so it simply needs to be glued on without forcing it into place. The whole thing is then finished with a satin varnish. And being a dullard that I am, I forgot to do this before applying the glazing, so I've masked them off and sprayed the paintwork. There's something really satisfying about a nice smooth satin varnish finish on paintwork. The wheel sets can now go in, and they're Dundas Models 8mm metal wheels. And being a classic Westcliff Works product, the wheel sets are bang on in the axle boxes. No modifier needed at all, which I like. You can see how easy it rolls without any fiddling. Brilliant. The van received a black wash. What I like about doing a wash on a model like this is that it settles in the joints between the wooden slats. It's almost like a lazy pin wash. I tend to apply the wash at the top and brush downwards. The black will always build up at the bottom of the model, so I soak that up with a clean paintbrush, working along each panel. I tried to use the airbrush to portray the soot along the top of the end, but it seemed to be a bit too much. So I wiped this up to make it look like someone had had a quick clean of it with a broom. So there we go. I keep thinking that I should do less for the videos each week, as I really don't have much spare time at the moment. But for some reason this week I ended up doing twice as much as usual. I think they look good though. And whilst I do have a Corris fan on Corris, this is portrayed in a much cleaner condition. The guards van by Westcliff Works is looking really good. I actually had the choice to use this or the Meridian models kit for this van. I braved it and went with this, for science. Luckily it's been drawn to a really high standard, and it will complement the coaches perfectly. I made the right choice. Still no transfers here yet though, and they will finish off the van really nicely when they do get here. So I guess thanks for both Dundas Models and Westcliff Works for this video. If you are tempted to make your own, details for both are in the description below. Thanks for watching, I trust you enjoyed it. Catch you on the flip side. Cheers.